In the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Arizona Territory, where the sun scorched the earth like an eternal forge and the wind whispered secrets of forgotten battles, a lone farmer named Elias Hawthorne toiled under the relentless sky. His hands, calloused and scarred from years of wrestling life from barren soil, gripped the plow as he carved furrows into the dust, but his heart echoed with a silence deeper than the canyons that scarred the landscape. For over a decade, Elias had lived in isolation on his modest homestead, a ramshackle cabin perched on the edge of a forgotten valley, ever since the fever had claimed his wife and young son in a single merciless winter. The weight of that loss had bent him like an old oak in a storm, turning a once vibrant man into a shadow of routine and regret, his days blending into nights filled with the haunting cries of coyotes that seemed to mock his solitude. But on a fateful afternoon in the dusty frontier town of Silver Creek, amid the clamor of an auction where men bartered lives like cattle, Elias's eyes fell upon her, a proud Apache woman, the last survivor of her decimated clan, chained and defiant, her dark eyes burning with the fire of a people nearly erased from the world. In that moment, as the bidders' voices rose like vultures circling prey, something long dormant stirred within him, a flicker of compassion that would ignite a chain of events neither could have foreseen. If this tale of redemption and unexpected bonds resonates with you, and if you believe in the power of kindness and second chances to heal even the deepest wounds, then hit that like button, drop a comment below sharing your thoughts, share this video with someone who needs a reminder of humanity's resilience, and subscribe to the channel, Moments of Love, for more stories that touch the soul. Elias had come to Silver Creek not seeking companionship, but driven by the practical need for supplies, flour, seeds, and tools to sustain his fragile existence on the homestead. The town was a rough patchwork of saloons, general stores, and makeshift markets, where the echoes of the recent Apache wars still lingered like gunpowder in the air. The conflicts had ravaged the land, leaving behind trails of blood and broken treaties, as settlers pushed westward with manifest destiny as their banner. Elias, a man of few words and fewer allusions, had avoided the fray, focusing instead on his patch of earth, but the wars had touched him indirectly through the stories carried by travelers and the occasional raid that stole his livestock. As he wandered the auction yard that day, the crowd's murmurs drew him closer to the platform where captives from the reservations were being sold off, remnants of a defeated people, their spirits crushed under the boot of progress. There she stood, Najoni, though Elias wouldn't learn her name until much later, her traditional deerskin dress torn and soiled, her long black hair matted with the dust of captivity, yet her posture radiated an unyielding strength that made the other bidders hesitate. She was the last of her band, the sole survivor after a brutal ambush by cavalry forces that had slaughtered her family in the name of taming the wild. Whispers among the crowd labeled her as dangerous, a relic of savagery, but Elias saw something else, the hollow grief in her gaze that mirrored his own, a silent scream against the cruelty of fate. When the bidding began, sparse and reluctant, Elias felt an inexplicable pull. He raised his hand, offering his meager savings, not out of desire for ownership, but from a buried instinct to offer shelter from the storm. The gavel fell, and in that instant, two broken souls were bound by circumstance, their paths converging on a collision course of pain and possibility. The journey back to the homestead was a trial of endurance, the wagon creaking over rugged trails under a sky that threatened rain but delivered only dust storms that stung like accusations. Najoni sat rigid in the back, her wrists still raw from the irons that Elias had removed as soon as they left town, a gesture she met with wary silence. She spoke no English, and he knew nothing of her tongue, their communication reduced to gestures and glances laden with mistrust. Elias's homestead was a humble affair, a single-room cabin built from adobe and salvaged wood, flanked by a small corral for his two aging horses and fields that yielded just enough corn and beans to keep starvation at bay. He showed her to a corner with a pallet of blankets, offering food from his sparse larder, dried jerky and flatbread, which she accepted with a nod but ate slowly, her eyes never leaving him, as if expecting betrayal at any moment. In those early days, the challenges mounted like gathering thunderheads. Najoni's spirit, forged in the freedoms of the open plains, rebelled against the confines of domesticity. She would slip away at dawn to wander the nearby mesas, returning only when hunger or exhaustion forced her hand, her absences filling Elias with a quiet panic that echoed his past losses. He struggled to understand her ways, the rituals she performed at sunset, facing the west with murmured chants that seemed to call to invisible ancestors, or the way she foraged for wild herbs and roots, transforming his bland meals into something infused with the earth's forgotten flavors. Language became their first battlefield. Elias attempted clumsy signs and drawings in the dirt, while she responded with sharp gestures that conveyed frustration and defiance. Loneliness, his constant companion, now twisted into something sharper, amplified by her presence, a reminder of what he had lost and what he could never fully grasp. As weeks turned to months, the harsh realities of frontier life tested them both, forging cracks in the walls they had built around their hearts. Winter descended with a vengeance, blanketing the valley in snow that isolated the homestead like a forgotten grave. Elias fell ill with a fever that racked his body, his strength sapped by the cold and years of unrelenting labor, leaving him bedridden and delirious, haunted by visions of his departed family. In his vulnerability, Najoni could have fled, vanishing into the wilderness that called to her blood, but instead, she stayed. Drawing on the knowledge passed down from her elders, she brewed teas from the herbs she had gathered, tending to him with a gentleness that surprised even her, wiping his brow and feeding him broth through the long nights. It was in those fevered hours that the first bridges formed. Elias, in his haze, murmured stories of his wife, Clara, and their son, little Samuel, how the fever had stolen them away in a blur of agony and unanswered prayers. Though the words meant nothing to her linguistically, the raw emotion in his voice transcended barriers, stirring memories of her own clan's massacre, the screams of her kin, the acrid smoke of burning Tippis, the profound emptiness of being the last voice of a silenced people. When Elias recovered, weaker but alive, he found her sitting by the fire, weaving a basket from reeds she had collected, her eyes softened by shared vigil. Gratitude became their common ground. He taught her simple English words, water, food, home, while she shared Apache phrases that rolled like poetry from her lips, each exchange chipping away at the isolation that had defined them. Yet, the path to healing was fraught with deeper struggles, as external shadows encroached upon their fragile sanctuary. Word of Najoni's presence spread through the territory, carried by drifters and ranchers who viewed her as a threat, a symbol of the unrest that still simmered in the aftermath of the wars. One night, a band of opportunistic outlaws, remnants of a disbanded militia, rode onto the homestead under the cover of darkness, their torches flickering like malevolent stars, demanding Elias hand over the savage woman they claimed was stolen property. Elias, armed only with his old rifle and a resolve born of newfound purpose, stood firm at the door, his voice steady as he declared her free and under his protection. Najoni, hidden in the shadows, emerged with a bow she had fashioned from scavenged wood, her arrow trained on the intruders, a fierce guardian spirit reborn. The confrontation escalated into a tense standoff, shots echoing through the night like thunderclaps, but together they repelled the attackers, Elias taking a graze to his shoulder that bled profusely, while Najoni's precision felled one assailant and scattered the rest. In the aftermath, as she bandaged his wound by the dim light of the lantern, their eyes met in a moment of profound understanding, the realization that survival was no longer solitary, that their wounds, both physical and unseen, had intertwined them irrevocably. Elias saw in her the strength he had lost, the wild freedom that could reignite his spirit, while Najoni discovered in him a quiet honor, a man who chose kindness over conquest, offering her not chains but a choice. Spring brought renewal to the valley, the snowmelt swelling the streams and coaxing green shoots from the soil, mirroring the subtle transformations in their lives. Elias expanded the fields, planting seeds Najoni had saved from her foraging, ancient varieties of corn that her people had cultivated for generations, their golden ears promising abundance. She taught him the ways of the land he had only scratched the surface of, how to read the stars for navigation, to track game with silent steps, to honor the spirits in the wind that carried prayers to the heavens. In return, he shared fragments of his world, the melodies of old folk songs hummed under his breath as they worked side by side, the simple joys of a well-tended garden yielding its first harvest. Their interactions deepened into a rhythm of mutual respect, moments of quiet intimacy building like layers of sediment into something enduring. Elias found himself smiling at her laughter, a sound like distant rain that washed away the dust of his grief, while Najoni felt the stirrings of trust, a warmth that thawed the ice around her heart. Challenges persisted, the cultural chasms that sometimes yawned wide, like when Elias's Christian prayers clashed with her Apache rituals, leading to heated gestures and eventual compromises, or the lingering prejudices of townsfolk who eyed them warily during rare supply runs. But each hurdle surmounted strengthened their bond, turning strangers into allies, then confidants, and finally, something akin to family. Elias began to dream again, visions not of loss but of futures where the homestead echoed with life, while Najoni reclaimed pieces of her heritage, weaving stories of her people into the fabric of their shared existence, ensuring they would not fade into oblivion. As the seasons cycled onward, The true turning point arrived not in grand gestures but in the quiet accumulation of shared sorrows and joys, culminating in a profound emotional reckoning under a full moon that bathed the valley in silver light. One evening, as they sat by the fire pit Elias had built at her suggestion, staring into the flames that danced like memories, Najoni placed her hand on his, a simple act that spoke volumes. In halting English mixed with Apache words, she shared the full weight of her past, the raid that had orphaned her, the reservations that had caged her spirit, the auction that had stripped her dignity, and how his unexpected mercy had offered a second chance, a bridge between worlds thought irreconcilable. Elias, tears tracing lines down his weathered face, confessed his own burdens, the guilt of surviving when his loved ones did not, the fear of opening his heart only to lose again, and how her presence had rekindled a light he believed extinguished forever. In that vulnerability, barriers crumbled entirely. They embraced not as owner and owned, but as equals forged in adversity, their union a testament to the human capacity for redemption. The homestead flourished under their combined efforts, becoming a haven where Apache traditions blended with settler practicality, a living symbol of harmony amid division. Years later, as children born of their love played in the fields, dark-haired and resilient, carrying the blood of two worlds, the valley whispered tales of the farmer who found his heart in the last Apache woman, a story that inspired wanderers passing through, reminding them that from the ashes of loss, new life could rise. If this story of love born from loneliness and second chances has touched your heart, stirring emotions that remind you of the beauty in human connection, then please like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, share it with friends who need a dose of inspiration, and subscribe to Moments of Love to never miss another tale that moves the soul. Before we end, I'd love to hear from you. Comment your favorite line from this story below, and let's keep the conversation going about kindness and redemption.